Welcome, everybody. This is our podcast for November 27th. Our 7th, says Tristan. He's going to run out of fingers soon. But I would like to welcome West Lincoln Mayor Dave Bylsma to our Grimsby office. We are going to cover a couple of things, well, several things. Some Niagara West viewers / readers of NewsNow may be aware of, maybe some not. But Mayor Bylsma has found himself in the news several times, well, let's say since Christmas, late fall, for reasons which he'd probably prefer not to be, but he has. And so we're going to go through some of these issues, talk about some whys and wherefores, and I'm going to try to have the mayor answer some of the questions that I hear from the general public, some people in West Lincoln, some people in the region at large, and we'll just see where things go. So, Dave, the first story that I can recall in a string of incidents going back, let's say 6 months, was NPCA, and you were removed as chair of NPCA in 2020. Well, actually, it was more than 6 months. That was January of last year.
Yeah.
Sorry, I stand corrected there.
Yeah.
And that revolved around some climate change questions, shall we say?
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that it's sort of been a not obvious, but questions that many have asked about, where the potential of religious beliefs has tied in with some of your conduct or things that you've said, whereas you are a municipal mayor and religious beliefs should not be intermingled, commingled, whatever, in the duties and dealings of a mayor. So the climate change question certainly was one where a lot of people were upset that you were questioning things in the first place. And as a journalist, questioning is what people need to do, sort of on both ends of the scale. But some people thought, and I'm not up to speed on what your exact questions were, so that's something I'm hoping to clarify, because I think questions are good, but a lot of people thought that you had crossed the line.
Yeah.
So maybe if you could explain a little bit on that particular issue to get things started.
So, absolutely. So first of all, I agree 100%. Questions are good. Questions are really the opportunity to explore any information, to gain, to glean. As politicians, I don't know what happened. And that's probably what gets me in trouble the most. I don't know what happened to the profession. It lost its inquisitiveness. It lost its ability to ask the tough questions, to strike up debates. I'm probably one of the biggest frustrations is my surprise that debate doesn't happen. And probably the thing that gets me in trouble the most is I see a congealing of one narrative on a number of issues, and we will explore that as we kind of go through your questions and some of the challenges that I've faced as mayor. Classic example, or the first example that you brought up was NPCA. Now, again, I have no problem agreeing with climate change. I think climate changes all the time. My questioning is deeper. I'm an engineer by study. I have a civil engineering from McMaster University, and one of the things that we dealt with as part of the subject matter is storms and storm sewer systems. That's all part of that big infrastructure that comes into a city, so you don't have flooding, those kind of things. So I'm very, very astute when it comes to the way storms are measured and the way that storm activity happens. From a scientific perspective, I'm science and data guy. I have an engineering degree, so you can't just kind of conceive of a building. You have to you follow science and data, and I do too when it comes to stormwater management and those kind of things. And so when you back up the train a little bit, I question some of the narrative surrounding, say we have a storm. 4 inches of rain falls on Grimsby and there's some flooding and stuff like that. People naturally say, oh, it's climate change. And I say, well, wait a minute here. From an engineering perspective, 4 inches of rain only in Grimsby does not a 100-year storm make. And so I understand what a 100-year storm is, statistically speaking, probability. So I challenge many of the events that are ascribed to climate change as just being localized, issues that municipalities deal with on an ongoing basis. And I also have questions about, the quote-unquote theories. When people start purporting theories as fact, I say to myself, now, prove your fact.
Theories and fact are two different things.
Yeah, theories and fact are two different things. So I ask questions about, you and I are roughly about the same age. We've been through the hole in the ozone. We've been through, acid rain and different factors. And some of them we've solved, and some of them we understand is just part of the natural ebb and flow. I mean, we grew up maybe in the 70s where we were talking about global ice age. And I'm blaming a little bit of a point because my challenge is to ask questions about underlying presuppositions, underlying assumptions about certain topic matter, certain things that we see or we're accepting as fact because the media tells us it's considered settled science, and sometimes I don't think that it is. So I ask those questions. That got me into trouble with the NPCA. One of the underlying assumptions is that man-produced carbon dioxide emissions are a fundamental or profoundly influential factor on climate change. I question that assumption. I think it has a lot of political overtones. I think that particular issue has been used, politicized greatly. But
at the NPCA table, their number one mandate is do what's best for the environment. You can get into the whys and wherefores and behind,
precisely,
but that should all take a backseat to what do we need to do right now. So
that leads us to the question of the NPCA mandate is to deal with erosion, floodwater management. If we get right to, and see, now I think that mankind has had a great impact on local water quality, has had a great impact on say, washouts. When we farmed and we stripped the trees off of a particular municipality or, a farm field and stuff like that, we change the dynamic. We change what happens when we get 4 inches of rain. All day long, I agree that we can do things to restore our tributaries and our rivers and lakes and stuff like that. I also understand, for example, when we are losing, say, Erie shoreline, and we attribute that to climate change, I'm thinking, well, wait, back up. Every lake level, every single lake of the 5 Great Lakes are man-controlled lake levels. They are. There's sluices and aqueducts and canal systems, and the power generation grid controls the lake levels, and they can do so. It's not like a tap, you turn it on and off, and a day you got everything back to normal. But there are ways and means in science. Say, for example, look at the snow load in Northern Ontario and how much water and forecasting and stuff like that. We should let a little bit more water through in February because there's lots of snow levels, and let's start. And it does take about 3 months to correct. But if we know in February or March what the snow loads are going to be when April, May, June come around and the snow is melting and all that water has to come through the system, we can be ahead of it. As an example, when we lose shoreline along the Erie, some of that is part of the natural ebb and flow of kind of that entropy, that creation that the world kind of goes through, that the sand always kind of erodes. But those extreme events or those seasons, I think we control all the time. So to attribute that necessarily to, global warming is problematic, because in the 70s, I remember Lake Ontario losing a lot of shoreline, after a number of years. In 77, those are some of the coldest winters that we had on record, and yet we were still losing the shorelines just by simply because we were mucking with the water levels in Lake Ontario. That's an example. So I question, and the challenge was they thought, no, chairman shouldn't question these things, you should just adopt the agenda. And I'm thinking, well, no, okay, fine, fair enough. You don't want me, maybe I'm not a good chair. Like, I'm going to be the first to say right now, I'm not wired to be a politician. What you know? Is that a fair description? I mean, honestly, like I am a businessman. We know each other as business partners.
I think during the election, people regarded you as sort of a stand-up guy option in West Lincoln.
Yeah,
just basically.
And you know what? I think there is a political ideal person. You know, a person that doesn't make any waves, and always says what the narrative should be. I don't know that that's an effective ideal, but let's imagine for a moment that there's a person that you know always runs down the middle of the road, always has the opinion of the majority, and purport. Probably not me.
Yeah, and in my experience of covering school boards, municipal councils, regional councils, everything you can cover, just about anybody who's to one side or the other, like you're saying, not a yes person, but just go with the majority almost blindly, as opposed to stepping into some challenges.
Yeah.
Both of those directions can wane over time in terms of effectiveness.
Yeah.
Because you're going to go too far one way or the other.
So
the balance is...
Yeah. So, for example, on the NPCA challenges that I faced and stuff like that, it had nothing to do with my religion. It's the way that I question certain science and data, or interpret, or even just simply fact, is that even an effect? What you believe about global warming or climate change, is that necessarily 90% of what we're doing on the ground when we are cleaning up rivers and tree stuff? Then we get to the kind of the...
So I don't want to go, because that's a whole conversation unto itself, and I want to save time for the more current issues. Not certainly that climate change is any less important, but we're got to roll through a few things. So fast forward to
June,
summer, last summer, and there was an issue, and the reason we're going through some of these things is because there's a cumulative wound that seems to be recurring for you, Dave.
Yeah.
And there was the issue of the pride flag issue for West Lincoln with a submission. A submission that came by email, and it took on a life of its own. Has now been rectified through a motion of council in terms of, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but there was a formal process established for application for whether it's a flag raising ceremony or any type of a special week recognition. You can maybe just give an overview of that.
Yeah, just quickly. First of all, West Lincoln does have a policy about establishing, Memorial Days and those kind of things. They established that many, many years ago, trying to avert kind of the offense that could create while you designated this particular day as a day of this, and then but not this one, or that we would be flooded with. And so that was on the, but it didn't go far enough with respect to flag raising. And some communities have decided no flags. And that was that. I know that people assume that naturally speaking, the flag, the pride flag would be in conflict with my personal beliefs. The very first flag that I raised was for autism awareness. And I felt uncomfortable raising that flag because I felt at that point, and you won't find anybody who's opposed to autism awareness or anything like that. But again, it created that environment of, you flew this flag, and what about our flag? And so then it was Crime Stoppers flag, and then it was this flag, and each one of those flags, look, there's nothing wrong with, making a special day about labor, or a special day about nurses, or a special day about this and about that. But at the end of the day, for me, the challenge and what got me into trouble was a whole discussion about identity politics and about splitting our municipalities up. At the time, of course, was emerging. It wasn't really quite an issue at the time, but the whole Black Lives Matter movement in America. And, there are multiple ethnic groups that have grievances against other ethnic groups. And there's the LGBTQ community that has legitimate grievances against, the way things they've been treated, socially across the past. That notwithstanding, by by flying everybody's flag and stuff like that, I thought, you know what? The Canadian flag, and this is the line I took, the Canadian flag represents, through the Constitution that it represents, all the diversity and inclusion that's necessary in Canada. Our Constitution protects these inalienable rights. I know they fought for them, and they've achieved them, and just like in the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, they worked very, very hard. And so at a fundamental level, and I'm not saying that the mentality of people can't change, but from a legal constitutional perspective, the Canadian flag represents all of Canadians. And that was the point I made. Let's just fly the Canadian flag. Let's avoid the controversies that can arise when we fly all the different flags. So you know, on the face of it certainly makes sense. Part of my recollection of comments around the council table at the time, though, was there might have been some concern that you almost individually were making that decision by not referring that email on. So if council, that's a discussion at the table, and a motion of council says that, you know, we agree with you, Mr. Mayor, or yes, we think it should just be the national flag, and that we're going to sort of opt out of the different X of the week, if you will, then that's one thing. But that's where, excuse me, part of the concern was that there was, whether it was intended or otherwise, that was sort of the net result of that email not being forwarded or whatever the case was. So, I mean, and I apologized for that, but it was an honest mistake. You know, I receive emails from Big Brothers Big Sisters, from Autism Awareness, Crime Stoppers, all asking for flags, this, that, and the other
Police
thing.
Week, everything. Sure.
And so, right. And so, but they're also forwarded to the clerk and to the confidential secretary. Like, they come through municipal channels in such a way that, you know, they end up on the table, or they're part of the kind of the staff function. My understanding was for about 8 years, this email had been coming to the mayors, and the former mayor had to admit that it came to him for six years in a row and wasn't dealt with. And it had come to me the previous year, and it just kind of fell by the wayside. Yep. Yes, could I have picked it up? Fair enough. I mean, I could pick up the Big Brothers Big Sisters banner and highlight it. A little bit of newness on the matter, the fact that it had already come through, the fact that I had, you know, just assumed that these things came broadly and they're dealt with, you know, in terms of, you know, like, look, they don't give you a manual to be a mayor. But again, I want to stress the point, and we could talk about the details, but I want to stress the point. It had nothing to do specifically with my religious belief. I know people made the assumption that, you know, I was motivated by that but there was an honest mistake. There was a fair-minded, debate from my perspective about, let's just be fair for everybody. Let's just fly the Canadian flag. And that's a legitimate position held by many. It doesn't identify any particular group, doesn't fracture society. And again, you know, my religion, people made assumptions that I was motivated just by a religious belief. Not fair and not accurate.
Yep.
But people think what they want to think, right?
So the reason I wanted to start with those two as examples is because, not to overstate or downplay either one, but, you know, it could be debated that there's gray area in both, as you're saying.
Sure.
The oversight on the Pride email, and, you know, your view that the NPCA discussion was a debate topic, not to be, throwing a anti-climate change log on the fire, if you will.
Yeah.
So if you fast forward to the St. Catharines anti-lockdown, anti-mask event, that's where things go from a matter of opinion to you were either there or you weren't.
Yeah.
Right.
Again,
there's no debating. There's no sugarcoating. I remember in the paper the week after that I can't remember the exact headline, but I think it just said Mayor Bylsma was wrong.
Yep.
And there's excuse me again. for my allergies.
Yeah.
But so I just want to. We'll move on with that one, but as an elected official who not only is supposed to provide an example and use their informed opinion to not direct residents, but certainly be a beacon of how people need to conduct themselves. In hindsight, what does your conscience, maybe not conscience, what does your ego and super ego, where are you on that topic?
So let me be absolutely clear. If I had to do it all over again in hindsight, I would. Okay, and there's reasons for that, but I'm a calculated individual. I do honestly try not to shoot from the hip, but I have, and we'll get to that. But generally speaking, on those types of events, I am a very calculated individual. Okay, and I use reason. I don't. And as I've already explained, I have legitimate thought processes that are not, directly, scripture and verse from the Bible or anything like that. They're reasoned public debate. They deal with critical race theory or identity politics or those kind of things. Part of a dialogue that's happening, a philosophical or existential dialogue about culture.
Which is fine.
Okay,
but
so,
as I noted in my editorial that week, your beliefs and your point can be made in far better ways than attending a group with people in the extreme, anti-mask, anti-lockdown, anti-vax, anti-whatever, where COVID's concerned. Because no matter what you think, whatever you say, your face is going with their baggage.
Correct. So, I don't think that there's any difference. Well, there is a difference, but in the previous July, there were Black Lives Matter protests, very large ones, that were attended by our own Prime Minister, our local mayors. Let me finish. Okay.
All right.
Because the ability, COVID notwithstanding, there are grievances that need to be brought forward. I was invited to speak at the St. Catherine's rally on behalf of small business, and I did speak.
You're not talking about the last summer. You're jumping back.
Yeah,
to
now I'm back to
okay,
so I was invited to speak, and I'll say that again, by calculation, there's a very different.
But couldn't you have spoke with a mask on?
Well.
This is what I'm talking about when I say, where are you today?
Okay, so it's an outdoor event.
Yeah.
I am standing on the stage.
Well, we've all seen the picture. 30 people within, 15 feet maybe.
Okay, so two things. There's a very different reality in April 10 of 2021 and July of 2020. In July of 2020, there was a hope of a vaccine. The reality is we're living today in the existence of not only 1, 2, or 3, but 4 COVID vaccines. Okay? So that is a very different reality than last July when COVID was still fairly fresh. We had no idea where this was going to go. And yet we were, taking on, and the people in those protests were taking on grave risks that could have spiraled out of control, and we didn't know at that time that we were going to have a vaccine. But April 10, we had a vaccine, and let me just give a bit of context here. For a year and approximately a month or two, small businesses were suffering. They were shut down. And
I'm aware.
Okay, and the trade-off or the concession that they made was we have people in long-term care who are dying. And so for the sake of society, we will sacrifice our business, our livelihood, because our livelihood compared to a life is a trade-off that on any scale is worth trading. So we traded our livelihood figuring that, we would take a hit to the pocketbook, but we would be saving lives in long-term care.
And hoping that it would get us to the end of the tunnel quicker.
Correct. April 10, 4 vaccines. And if you look at the statistics that Niagara Region puts out at that time or around that time, approximately 80 to 90% of residents in long-term care, the ones that were experiencing the most caseload and deaths and hospitalizations, and their caregivers were vaccinated with these vaccines.
I think by first week of May, everybody was fully vaccinated in long-term care. So it was close.
So very, very close, right? And yet we were entering a lockdown, and small businesses are saying, okay, now it's our turn, okay? Those people that were the most vulnerable have that,
But I'm not disputing what you're going there to say and what you're going there to support.
Yeah.
But you could have said all those things and worn a mask and visibly portrayed to all that you're leading by example, and it wouldn't have changed the words that came out of your mouth one bit, right?
So again, a calculated risk. This is probably where people will.
Why risk at all?
I suppose the simple reason is I've never. Okay, so again, now I have a belief. And I've maintained that all the way through, that masks do sweet bugger all, and that's people with science and data will say that they do, and I have science and data that says that we don't. We've only been in this for 1 year. We can have that debate. I took the line that masking and the social distancing part, with where the vaccine was at that time, with who had died with it, unfortunately, and where we were April 10, it was a calculated risk to move us toward normalcy.
I understand.
And here we are today.
But wading through, there's lots of issues.
Yep.
Lots of spin-offs, lots of peripheral.
Yeah.
But, even if you, Dave, don't believe in masks, you're still the mayor of a municipality in Niagara Region, in the province of Ontario, in Canada, where all mandates say wear a mask within whatever.
Yeah. Okay, and I guess that's where, as a politician, I'm not really good either, because I took a line.
Right. Which you're entitled to do.
Am I?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you still, as mayor, need to follow provincially mandated guidelines.
I guess
it's not. They're not telling you to commit a crime there. They're doing something whether you think it protects you or not. If you were a carrier, and forgive me, the names escape me, with hidden, hidden COVID.
Yeah.
I wish I could think. But and you passed it on to someone else. Asymptomatic. Right. So then that's a problem, and you have no way to know that. So that's where you could be the worst politician on the planet, but that's a social safety thing or action. And this is the different from before, where you could interpret words or philosophy or whatever. This was a highly visible action that ended up on lots of TVs.
Yeah.
I've seen that photo I don't know how many times
me too.
since.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. Because you're a mayor, that group used you as the poster boy.
Correct.
And there was lots of other far more out there, less thoughtfully made comment than by yourself. And this is where I say people are allowed to think what they want to think, but you're getting carried in that direction, rightfully or wrongfully, because you were there.
Yeah.
And my point when I saw that photo is, and what I'm said earlier, you could have made stellar points. You could have been bang on. You could have been 100% right. And your opinion would still be cast in serious doubt simply because you weren't following provincial policy.
Yeah.
So, but you don't think that's wrong. And it's the math part. I'm not talking about what you're there, what your message is, or what you're there to say.
Well, I guess there is a sense in which you would acknowledge that there are many people who share that opinion, the opinion of the anti-vaxxer, right?
And there's so much exhaustion. People are fading both ways in the other because they can't take another punch.
So from a political perspective, when do they get represented? And your point is kind of
Believe me, I've
right.
I've had these discussions with restaurant owners all over the West
So
End.
the inconsistency of saying that I don't think masks work, I think that the time of lockdowns.
No, but it doesn't matter if they work.
But if I'm being inconsistent if I wear the masks and I follow the lockdown protocols, and I think that we're
only if you're regularly speaking at large gatherings, whether it's indoors or outdoors.
There are politicians who have taken that line. I mean, there are other very notable Canadian politicians: Maxime Bernier, Derek Sloan, Randy Hillier, Roman Baber.
I'm aware. They aren't in my coverage area. Dave.
I understand. so let's be honest. That was in a. I am, quote, for lack of a better term, the one representing a political discourse that's happening right across this nation. There's a Liberty Caucus. I think there's dozens and dozens. I don't know what it's up to. Liberty Caucus of elected officials who are not in agreement with the lockdown and the masking, the lockdown, and that all those protocols.
Which, in theory, politics is built on disagreement. It forces solutions, well thought out solutions.
That's what I thought.
I don't have. Well. We're in such a polarized state.
Bing.
And I'm not talking about a major issue like this. I could show you 20 polarized situations, exactly. Everything from what kind of van to buy for Town of Grimsby Fire Department.
Yeah.
So there's no middle. There's no middle to debate.
I know.
And so what I'm trying to say to you is it's not a question of whether you're right or wrong, because your point is lost, because with the vast majority, of people, I would say, completely discredit what you're saying. They can just look at the photo, not hear any audio, just see the photo. Anything that comes after,
and I'm gonna push back on that. I don't know that the majority of the people would be.
Oh, come on. No. Stop it. Stop it. No.
I'm going to say that there's also a very clear, large grouping of people that would take great encouragement that there is a politician who's willing to push the envelope back towards normalcy.
What I'm talking about here is the mask issue, because it's like, I hate wearing them. Like, I just don't.
But I don't.
But I wear it.
I don't.
Wherever I am that I need to have it, I put it on, and I always will until somebody says we're in the free, we're scot clear here. So,
and when is that?
And that's when I don't know. It could be 3 years. I'm. It's not something that I'm worried about, because it's not something I control. Mm-hmm. But, you're talking about, because that event was anti-lockdown, which is a whole other matter, where you're tying in mental health and economics, and you get into the gray areas, because yes, you could say locking down saves lives, but it also ruins lives financially.
Correct.
And ruins lives
Correct.
Mentally
Correct.
Of parents, of their kids.
Correct.
Who see their parents disintegrating before their eyes. Long, painful, drawn out stories. So that's where you get into the gray area. But all I'm trying to say is the point, I'm trying to clear through those weeds to get to the point where you should say, you know what, Mike, you're right. I should have had a mask on addressing those people.
Yeah, no, I'm very comfortable with what that image that you keep talking about portrays in terms of my position. And again, context.
I get the position, but it's the conduct.
But context. I was trying to establish a context that may have been, for me, verboten 6 months earlier. It was the emergence of 4 vaccines on April 10th.
Yeah, but we're not
very
there.
Different context.
We're not there, though. And in April, that was just when they were starting to question Moderna and second shots. And
so we have, but the context is everything. And I think it's very, very important. The context, and I'm going to come back to that over and over and again, because that's my defense. 4 vaccines were approved or virtually approved. They were not necessarily all here, but all approved we had we followed a certain protocol for well more than a year. And then when these were unfolding, we were told these vaccines were safe and effective. Well, if they're effective, then as we roll them out, we were not trading the balance of risk. In the beginning, long-term care, no denying that was very, very serious. Yeah. And we, as small businessmen, were saying, we're willing to forego all of our livelihood. We might lose our businesses, but we're willing to do that.
You're debating the lockdown. I'm not debating the lockdown issue here.
Well, but with it was the mask. With it was the social distancing. All of those things. But when we were trading the vaccines for the risk, what we were not looking at is the sacrifices that were made for 15 months or 14 months, and I'm talking about mental, social health. Obviously we can talk about the money, but drug overdoses and drug problems and abuse in the home and domestic violence, all these things, they were never brought into focus. We understood that we didn't trade. We were, even to this day, we are still reticent to talk about mental health and overdoses and domestic violence.
Hugely important topics.
But
if you made that speech at the podium with a mask on, you wouldn't have alienated, let's say not necessarily a majority, but a lot of people would have wanted to hear what you had to say, appreciated the fact that a municipal mayor was stepping into that and driving home a point in an appropriate way, because not wearing a mask and making potentially, like, not debating the comments, but even if you consider them completely valid, just not having the mask on and going to that side of the line does damage to the message that you're giving.
Or if you're willing to look at it, you could, from the science data perspective, that event took place, and there was no uptick, for example, in cases.
But it's about risk.
Exactly.
It's about risk.
Exactly. It's about risk. All day long, it's about risk.
Like I was saying, I don't like wearing them, but I'll wear them until somebody says not to.
And I'll take the
risk. Why risk?
Yeah, but the thing is,
and you had both your vaccines or a vaccine by whatever in April?
No.
So isn't that even more of a risk for you?
Is that something that I'm willing to take?
Looking at the crowd?
But no, not at all. See, when COVID was happening, where were we focused on? Long-term care. I don't live in long-term care. I have a perfectly
most immediate hotspots. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were looking at. In my questioning of Dr. Hergy, and I asked about why people were dying, he said 95% of the deaths were in long-term care. People had 2.5, 2.6 on average comorbidities. So there were obviously some people did survive long-term care, but when that population where the vast majority, 95% of the deaths occur, were vaccinated and their caregivers vaccinated, that was the kind of event for me that says, okay, now April 10, we should be opening up our economy. We should be dropping the masks, because the masks were about transmission for those people. We should be hugging those people. We should be going to long-term care and hugging grandma. At that point, they've been vaccinated. See, I guess the assumption was that when you're vaccinated, you're protected. So if I come with no vaccine, as long as you have that, isn't that what we were taught about how vaccines work? If I get a rabies vaccine, you're not protected because I took the rabies vaccine. You want to get vaccine, protect yourself from rabies, you take the vaccine. You take it for you, I take it for me. They took it for themselves in long-term care. So it doesn't matter if I have rabies. If you have the vaccine, you're protected from me, heaven forbid, or polio, or smallpox, or any of the number of the other chicken pox. It's the same thing. You can go, you have this immunity that's built up through the vaccine. That's how I thought vaccines were working. Yeah. And now we're getting a very different,
but you're getting into the nuts and bolts of your message there, right? But why are you drawing that line between the action of, like, I don't understand why the mask, no mask represents such titanic messaging for you in relation to the messages that you were wanting to deliver at that presentation.
I would say that all of those, the social distance, the masking, the lockdowns, all are born out of a very, very similar mindset. I see them as a collection. I see them as a threefold. The issues surround, there is a lot of continuity between the no more lockdown, and you pointed that out initially, the no more lockdown, the anti-mask, the anti-vaccine crowd tends to, it's pretty rare to say to a guy, to find an individual, a person who's, in favor of more lockdowns but is pro-vaccine. Like, there's a bit of a mindset, a collection of similar functions, because they do work together. If you're anti-mask, you tend to think, well, I have a perfectly good, strong immune system. We were shown that in the first 10 months, 11 months, there were many people. COVID was going around. Most people who were of a good health description survived with minimal symptoms. I've even posted that my parents both received COVID. Took them about a week to get through. They did so quite well. They're very healthy people. They eat well, and 79, 73, and came through with very minimal. Right. So in our experience,
very lucky, because it doesn't always work out that way.
Well, I would say, again, you talked about mitigated risk. You know what? Let's just pause for a second. At the end of the day, it had nothing to do with my religious beliefs. It was a political.
Like I said at the very start, there's been a cumulative effect of things where timing or choices affect the credibility of what you're saying.
Yep.
And so by the time you get to the St. Catharines event, people are already thinking, okay, what's Dave done now?
Yep.
And then again they see that image and they think, oh, well.
Yep. Sure. You know what, people. Again,
you don't want to be, that's Dave being Dave.
No.
You don't want to get to that level.
Well, I know.
But how? Like, today still, you think it was the right thing to do. That's what I just can't get my mind around.
Yeah.
So explain that one to me.
Well, again,
why do you not think it was a mistake?
Context is everything.
Yeah, but we've got the context.
Yeah, so for me, when we have 4 vaccines and our long-term care patients are...
But what's the provincial guideline?
See, that's where I disagree with the province all day long.
Yeah?
All day long, I think that the province... why are we insisting... a simple question. And when you ask the question and I can't give an answer, when you don't have an answer, I have to take the line that then there's no reason to follow the guidelines. The simple question is, if in the Niagara region we have not had a single death under the age of 29, it's just a fact. You go to our site and they break it all down.
So that's
under
a good
the
thing.
age of, so
Great.
why are we So why would we vaccinate people under the age of 29? There's no reason. Statistically speaking, science and data, no reason to vaccinate under...
Science and data goes back about 14 or 15 months. Like, there's still a lot about these, and you get into the variants. Let's not even get into the variants. But there's far more still that's not known than is known. So again, it comes down to risk.
What we know, undisputable fact, you'll agree with me, I agree. Not a single person under the age of 29 in Niagara has died of COVID. It's a fact.
Okay.
It's indisputable. So why would they take a vaccine? And if you can't tell me why they would take a vaccine, if not a single one has done it, then it's totally legitimate for me to promote the fact that I don't think anybody under the age of 29 should take it. I certainly couldn't recommend it to them.
Because a vaccine, even the AstraZeneca, which is the one that I took, if an AstraZeneca can mitigate or hopefully eliminate the possibility of a serious illness, hospitalization, and death, And, if 100% of COVID is death and you are, don't go above 30 or 40% on the scale of illness, then that's worth doing, no?
You undermined it. You undermined your question. The simple fact is no one under the age of 29 has died.
No, but the possibility is there. So if you could eliminate the possibility through vaccination, where even if someone, a 15-year-old gets sick, and you know that the chances are 98% that they won't even have to be hospitalized, what parent wouldn't want that for their kid?
So, Mike, all day long we trade risks. I mean,
but this isn't one that needs to be taken.
But it is. But it is. In the same 15 months, you know how many 29-year-olds and less died of car accidents? How many 29-year-olds less died of suicide? How many 29-year-old or less died of drug overdoses?
Well, even flu. Nobody's talking about flu this year because nobody got the flu. You either got COVID or you didn't get sick because everybody was in their house.
Well, I mean, for 118
That's
years
we've had things I've heard.
Well, see, it does throw a wrench into the thing. But what happened to the flu? For 180 years, we've had the flu run its course, take out a certain percent of the population.
I don't want to go down the flu.
No, I know. All that to say, it was the context on April 10 when I entered this thing and spoke my bit about no more lockdowns with no mask on is a calculated risk. You may differ with me where you put your risk lines, but when I look at the statistics on that day,
what I'm differing with you on is as an elected official speaking at a large public gathering, you could have made an anti-lockdown message and still had a mask, and nobody would have.
They would have still thrown me under the bus. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but you wouldn't have.
They would have taken that away, perhaps. But again, to me, they all go hand in glove. The no more. See, it's not even the business. Like, there's a business component to that, but there is a social and a mental health issue component to that.
100%.
Right.
100%.
So we trade risks all day long. If we do not have a single death under the age of 29, then that, as an example, that's a very clear indication that when we have suicides and we see increases, like we have a baseline of suicide or drug overdose that's been established over time. So that delta, what happened in 2020? What's the delta in 2020 time? When that delta is infinitely, because there's no cases, it's always infinite, something over zero. That's my point.
Okay, but here's an analogy, and bear with me. So I want to make let's say I agree with you 100% on all the lockdown issues and all the mental health and domestic violence, all those things that are inflamed or increased as a result of all kinds of social impacts from the last 14 months. And somebody asked me to speak at, an event in Smithville at Town Hall. And I come walking out of Town Hall, walk up to the podium, and I'm going to say, you wrote the speech for me, but I'm going to make the speech. And I walk out of Town Hall. Do you remember Oopsie the Clown used to be on TV on Saturdays? He had the big orange hair.
Yeah.
I walk out of Town Hall wearing orange hair. Everything, I'm wearing a suit otherwise.
Yeah.
Are people going to take what I'm saying seriously?
You know what? I think, they could, because...
They could, but they won't.
Well...
You're talking human nature there.
Again, so that gets back to the...
And I'm not meaning to make... I'm not meaning to make light of the situation at all.
No.
It's a visual thing. And that's nonsensical.
Yeah.
I don't believe Premier Ford has made any kind of... issued any decrees about orange hair and presentations in public.
No.
But when you come out and you're speaking in a group, in the middle, when numbers were still going up, I hear what you're saying about vaccines, but nothing was in control in April.
Deaths were coming down.
And hospitalizations at the time, but then the ICUs were shooting up.
So again, I would say that when you study the science and the data, there is a large political contribution or component. There's no denying the fact that COVID has been politicized at some level, and maybe in many levels, very politicized.
In some ways, Yes,
Okay.
And I don't think there's anybody that wants it,
No.
but there's some situations where organizations and some people haven't been able to avoid it.
Yeah.
I don't think, because that's a line people can dance over really quick.
Bingo.
And nobody wants that.
Okay, so let's say there was a legitimacy to the COVID narrative for the first 8-12 months. That's why April 10 is a very important date for me, more or less. At that point, when we had the 4 vaccines, I'm going to keep coming back to that because that is a turning point for me on when COVID became extremely political. And the narrative that we heard for the first 12 months was COVID's very serious, long-term care is in dire straits, and there was a component of the management of long-term care, absolutely, and we understand that too. But by the time April, the spring rolled out, the narrative was quickly changing from what we always hoped that the vaccines would do, get us all back to normal. By April 10, we have 4. We've protected the people in long-term care where 95% of the deaths were happening. Even though these people had comorbidities, let's just leave that out. By April 10, we could have been safely reopening, maybe with masking, and what we were doing instead was shutting down. There are regions of Ontario that have not been open since last year, November. They have been in lockdown for 8 months. There is a huge crisis of culture, crisis of mental and social, economic proportions that we have not even uncovered because we're still kind of living in this. By April,
honestly,
May,
people aren't talking about that a whole lot generally because they don't want to stir up the. I don't want to say stir up the validity, but I see it every week.
Yeah,
like
you're an ad guy.
People who've been good friends of mine for 20 plus years, just seeing their business disintegrate before their eyes. And it's happening all the time.
And I'll say this too, what I'm seeing in my business, and I'm a wholesale business, so I'm a little bit insulated from that retail sector, but what I'm seeing now is supply chain issues. Again, a highly political problem, where we're seeing supply chain, and I think you're going to see this bear out in the next 2 or 3 months. Those businesses that still survive, you're going to start to see in for example, grocery stores, certain things not being able. And come on, even the fact that you can go buy toothpaste and you can buy women's beauty products, but you can't buy underwear for your children. Mike, there is no reason that's not a political, and
whole other, I agree.
Right?
Whole other conversation.
That's all been since April 10.
Yeah,
April 10. And those are the types of political things that have been happening. And I say April 10 because that was the date of the event, but it could have been plus or minus a month or whatever. But we were turning the page when we have 4 safe and effective vaccines, and you and I were taught for 50 years how vaccines work. You take them, you're protected.
As I say, my issue of contention there isn't even with whether you were there or with your message, purely with the mechanics of how the message was delivered. Okay. Because to me, that's a starting point where you, even if you agree or disagree with your message, it was, in my opinion, discredited before you even spoke.
Fair enough. Again,
next topic. Let's move on because we can go in circles for a while. So, the most recent issue, honestly, I haven't read. I don't know every detail. But I have to start that conversation by saying, "What the heck were you thinking, man?"
Okay, so. Asking questions is paramount for me. Okay, always. I even to the point where,
and just to set the context before you talk, my understanding, you correct me if I'm wrong, because I understood that you had typed / sent a comment on social media. I'm assuming Facebook, but I don't know that. I never saw the comment. I never saw the conversation, so I can't speak to any of that. But I'd understood that a comment was sent to a lady in Niagara Region.
Yeah.
As part of a conversation.
Yeah.
And maybe if you could explain the comment first.
So I had a concern regarding women's health with respect to the vaccine. People taking the vaccine and seeing changes in women in particular seeing changes in their health, women's health. I do have a smattering of people from a wide range of experiences and ideas, concepts, political constructs, and stuff like that. The danger as a politician is that you form your own echo chamber, right? People speak what you have said to them, and you speak it back to them, and those kind of things. So I have a respect for people. Let's be political, far left. People that I don't share their feminist views or their presuppositions about government or all those kinds of things. This individual was somebody that I had multiple conversations on different topic matters regarding COVID events all the way through. I made
professional / friendly conversations.
Yeah. We had nothing. It's not that we've known each other any longer than just being.
So you're just contacting her to gather opinion.
Yeah, and it was a messenger. It was a private message to her account, just basically saying, and she had on Facebook posted that she had the vaccine, and I that was a momentary. I'm not a perfect man. That was a momentary shot from the hip. And I just simply asked, hey, have you noticed any change in your period? That was my question. Private. And then I concluded that by saying, it's none of my business. I respect your person and your privacy. So she could have told me to pound salt all day.
Did she answer?
Nope, she didn't answer. She instead took the whole message, and it ended up with a reporter, Grant LaFlèche, and it ended up...
have you heard from her since?
I have offered her an apology. I did that fairly quickly. I didn't know. It was about a 6-8 hour lapse before it came back to me because said reporter reached out to me and said, did you in fact ask this question? Unfortunately, and you're absolutely right when you say some of my antics cloud what I'm driving at. And that's a classic example.
It's another log on the fire, right? As they say.
So I apologized to her privately, same format. I also apologized publicly at the region, about the way that I've embarrassed her and offended her, the way that I've embarrassed and offended my own municipality, my fellow councillors on the regional council, and the residents as a whole. And I didn't want to, again, I've disqualified in that sense my concerns, unfortunately, for women's health. It's an issue that I don't see a lot of airplay, and I had questions about that. I have grave concerns about that still to this day. But unfortunately, the simple fact that I tend to ask questions, it was a question, and I in that question I did give her the out. I said, it's none of my business. It's none of my business. I respect your person and your privacy, and I do. There's probably 100 different ways that I could have asked the question without making it personal, and that's the part that I regret. And there are perhaps other ways that I could have gleaned information about women's health, but. Alas, that is not what took place. Again, not motivated by my religious understanding or these are concerns that are raised to me by other constituents, and I was trying to get a fulsome picture. Yes, my echo chamber might be putting these thoughts in my head more than most, but I went to the far side, and I wanted to hear a question. I could have said something along the lines, have you heard anything about
any studies?
Or have you heard in your anecdotal evidence? Because, see, at the end of the day, I am more concerned about anecdotal level. Being a small town mayor, what are they saying at the water cooler? What are they saying at the hitchin post? Those kind of things concern me because there is science and data. When this is all done,
you need to be able to translate and explain information in a, I'll use the term conversational manner,
right?
Because that's what the vast majority of your residents are going to be able to digest and understand. And that's what they probably want, as opposed to a study with reams of paper.
And if you talk to any person on the street, and you ask them about the science, the data that the federal and the provincial governments and even the regional levels are claiming is science and data, and then you talk to the person on the street and you ask them for their experience, and all day long you're going to get slightly maybe even gross inconsistencies between the two, because the average person on the street has had a number of experiences with COVID, for example, some positive, some negative. Some are going to confirm the science and the data. Some are going to fly completely in the face of the science and the data.
That's the nature of the illness.
That's the nature of the illness, right? And so what I'm keenly concerned about is when we don't check the national statistics of science and data against our own experience, and if there's a disconnect, and I'm receiving information that causes me to question what's exactly happening with the science and the data, and then knowing this overall thing about the politicization of this disease post-April, I start to think, why are we still sitting here now with a population that's approximately 70% vaccinated with at least one dose here today, as we sit here in Niagara region?
In Niagara
region. Why are we still sitting here with many of our businesses shut down? Case loads have been dropping, and we just got golf back.
Yeah.
Again, right?
But like I said, the lockdown and business impacts is a completely valid and other major debate. But just to summarize this last issue, it is another log on the Dave Bylsma fire.
I know. And you know what? I guess my opening salvo, and just to kind of humanize all this, they don't give you a manual to be a mayor. Like it's not a right.
And you
Second of all,
and you got people like me that are just waiting for you to fall on your nose.
And there's a certain truth to that. So I guess from a personal conviction level, like a personal legacy issue, I don't want it to be said, well, Dave just told a line, or Dave was, But
you can go against the grain and make that speech with a mask on.
if that's going to be, the hang up.
On that issue it is.
Well, between you and I, sure. Yeah. But you talk about logs on the fire. In each one of these, I've explained somewhat of a context, and I've acknowledged that yes, I shoot from the hip. And I've acknowledged that, and I've explained that none of these necessarily draw from a particular, in my own Christian religion, in my personal, there are people who wear masks and people who don't. So it's not necessarily, scripture and verse, you shall not wear a mask. You won't find that.
But they're not mayors.
But at the end of the day,
you mentioned about context. You cannot get around that context.
Could you label me an activist mayor? I think that would be fair.
Are you more worried about the economic impacts of lockdown and the resulting mental and social aspects?
Yes.
Or of whether you're wearing a mask? Which one is your priority?
My priority, and as if you look at all my questions in region all day long, every night has always been mental, social, economic health.
Okay.
Always has been.
If wearing a mask helps you make those points, I don't want to see you make those points again without a mask on.
Okay, so So
if it forwards your cause, which it would, it would just get you through an instant defense of thousands of people. No?
Perhaps, I guess we'll never know, but ultimately,
we'll know.
Again, for me, April was a turning point. And it had to do with...
Even if it was next April, and everybody's been vaxxed, or, like if it is still a provincial guideline, everything's wide open, restaurants are full capacity.
Okay, so let me in America, for example, they're starting to frame this in the terms of, if you get the vaccine, you don't have to wear the mask.
Yeah, right? CDC just started doing that last week. Yeah.
So if we're 70% vaccinated here, what's like if we have 4 vaccines,
and I'm not disputing that.
So there's another component of this that we haven't talked about, and I really don't want to open up another can of worms. But personally, Dave Bylsma has never taken a flu vaccine for very similar reasons.
Last time I got one was 20 years ago. I got as sick as I ever got in my life. Haven't taken one since.
Okay, so
my mom hates it.
Again. And that flu vaccine, the idea of so you take your risks every winter of getting a flu. You had the flu vaccine, had a bad experience. I've heard that many, many times, by the way. That's a very common experience. But people make choices. And you know what? People die of flu. Like if you look at the statistics in 19, 18, 17, 2000, all the way back.
Not a comparable death rate to COVID, though.
Actually, it is. Order of magnitude, it is.
Whole other conversation.
Okay. Having said that, why can't our experience with respect to our relationship to a COVID vaccine be similar to our relationship to a flu vaccine? If we look at the science and data, who is dying, who gets hospitalized all day long, our seniors should be vaccinated, but those people somewhere around the 60, it really plummets. There are 3 people in the Niagara region below the age of 49 that have passed due to COVID. So 3 people under the age of 50. Yeah.
But you're getting far down the rabbit hole.
I know. And this is, we've had 14 months to think about it, right?
And it's not 50. That it's not valid. No. And I don't want to, but it is a separate conversation.
So for me, the failing to wear the mask, or the deliberate not wearing the mask, was part of the message.
Okay.
Fair enough.
So we're going to agree to disagree.
You know what? And I because we're at this more than an hour.
Yes. And we figured half an hour to start. So to summarize and get us out the door, your municipality had a special meeting last Thursday. The discussion, I believe, was in closed session, and when it came out, you were removed off a few committees.
Yeah,
correct?
Heritage and the Penn West Utility Board.
Okay.
Yep.
So Dave Bylsma going forward has learned what?
Again, so the shoot from the hip thing. There's a lesson learned there, right?
People do appreciate that, though. They don't like this.
I know. But you're right. It does get you into trouble, right?
Clearly,
and especially in a day and an age with social media and stuff like that. So yes, I've been canceled numerous times.
Yeah, but you've done some of the erasing yourself there by stepping on your own feet.
Yeah. So I'm. What have I learned?
So how does Dave Bylsma unerase himself?
Yeah. So I could.
Are you even worried about that?
So I flip between two realities. There's the Dave Bylsma that could probably just say, you know what, let's just not make any waves for 18 more months. I've set the wedge issues, for example, from a political perspective. I'm going to be a guy that's going to be very pro business, open up the economy, all those kind of things, right? Yeah. That die's been cast. People know what I think about those things. And then just let that coast. the Dave Bylsma I know, the one that's in my head, just cannot. I struggle when I see a question there that I can't ask it. I don't know, because you know what? All day long, I have other counselors, other regional counselors, other mayors tell me behind the scenes, I have the same question. Well, then ask the bloody question. Like, why are you afraid to ask the question? I'll tell you why. Because it casts you, when you stick your head, like whack-a-mole, you stick your head out, boom. And is my political, like,
well, in the end, any politician has to be true to themselves.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, right, excuse me, right, wrong, or indifferent, voters in West Lincoln will decide if you were not getting into 2022 in any way, shape, or form. But, that'll be up to voters in West Lincoln to decide whether not just, where the line was, where you went over the line, how you conducted yourself on the back end. I appreciate you coming in today. I've dealt with you on many things over several years, and I think when you're describing yourself and how you're trying to look at and come at issues, I get that, but it's because I've seen you in various levels of operation for years, so I understand that. Yeah. But so it's easy for me to take one thing and drill it down to that mask aspect, or you mentioned about the more recent comment in the email question where maybe you didn't set the context quite appropriate. There was a line, and you've already agreed and admitted and apologized for going over that line. So it's not just what's happened, but how you've dealt with it, and that's something that ultimately voters will decide. It's not up to you or me. So anyway, I'd like to say I appreciate. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to mention?
I guess there's that animal song. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood. I guess I appreciate it. That you gave me
of
the
all
forum.
Things today, I never thought you'd be quoting an animal song.
Yeah, I know. I'm full of surprises. All right,
that's a hat out of a rabbit, right there.
And it's certainly you've given me a fair shake. This opportunity. I appreciate you didn't have to touch me with a 10-foot pole, but I've appreciated your fair-mindedness. You call it out, and sometimes you're brutal on me. Sometimes, I think...
I like to think I walk on both sides of that street.
Well, you know what?
And not just you. I've got lots of people in other towns.
You are a force to be reckoned with as a fair-minded politician. I can honestly say that all the politicians fear you in the sense that... Not that you're the rising and falling. You're no Oprah Winfrey, but there's a sense in which whether you give us the gears when we step out of line, and it doesn't.
I like to think so.
Yeah,
I have no problem giving credit, but
no. But you know what? I have no problem you giving me the gears.
I'm here for the taxpayers.
Right? Yeah,
that's the bottom line.
Well, your subscribers, they're the boss. They're in the. Yeah. You write your stuff up, and as a politician, the electorate, same group of people. You have subscribers. I have the electorate.
Yep.
Same group of people. They determine whether we get mandates or not.
Well, and my job is to give them information.
Yeah, you give them information. If they don't like the information that you're passing on to them, you see your ad revenues go down, and you see subscription rates go down, and they turn the page, right?
Yep.
And that at the end of the day is very honest. It is the absolute most honest.
There's no sense not being honest, because what we do, and I don't want to spend time talking about the paper, but our calling card is delivered every week.
Yep.
Everything we know, everything we see in the community that week is right there in print for everybody to see.
Yep.
Not unlike council, although we don't get to have closed sessions with the paper. But, our job is to root that information out, give it to the public, and the public decides what they want more of, what they want less of, what they believe in, what cheeses them off. Yeah. And that's why I get a lot of letters to the editor.
And I live in that same reality. You know what? The electoral system it's geared in such a way that you let somebody a long enough leash for 4 years, and then they pass judgment on that. My performance review is done every 4 years, and if I get tossed then I can say, well, you know what, I'm not your man. I didn't ruin the town, and we were paving. The taxes are still good. I didn't ruin the town. I ruined perhaps a mindset or a
But
discussion
there's those
topic.
that say you've dented the reputation of the municipality. Not
Yeah.
in an administrative, functional, capital investment building way.
Yeah.
But, you want people when they hear West Lincoln to think up and coming town in Smithville, great
Yeah.
rural community,
Yeah.
great people,
Yeah.
great heart.
I know.
That's
Yeah.
what you want
And-
people
and
to think of
I know.
right off the bat.
Yeah. And I'm being very cognizant of that when I make my decisions. But at the end of the day, they will let me know in a year and a half.
Well, you have full control over what happens, Mr. Bylsma.
I know, I do. That's what I'm saying. I've said, is there? My desire is to just, I've said my bit. I like there's a bit of a parable or a bit of a picture of a watchman on the wall. I've said some things. I set the wedges, so to speak, and then I hope to just I hope we're all out of this in a year and a half.
We're out of it by
Right.
fall.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's wrap it up.
All right.
Thank you very much for your time.
No problem.
Greatly appreciate you coming in and
yeah, good
sparring
forum.
away for an hour and change.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in, and thanks to Tristan for coming in on a holiday Monday. Bye, everybody. See you next
bye-bye.
week.
Yeah.